So let's start with the biggest one. Baylor lost at home to Oklahoma State. That's 2 straight losses for the reigning national champions. You concerned at all about the Bears going from 15-0 to 15-2?
I got to be honest, not overly concerned. I still consider Baylor a national championship contender. But how about this? Just 54 points. Only 54 points for the Bears? Shot 31% from the field. Now, the context is that's important, because if you were either out of the house or ping-ponging around, you weren't locked in on this game because you thought it was Baylor at home in Oklahoma State. You didn't get to see a lot of it. James Akinjo did not play down the stretch because he was hampered by this back injury. He was basically out the final 10 minutes of the game, and you could argue that was a major factor in Baylor not being able to kind of escape, and maybe they get the win. They barely get a mention on this pod. Adam Flagler did not play well. Baylor was down 17 with like 11 and change to go, rallied, got the margin to 1, and then it had a couple of bad turnovers in the final minute where chance expired. I think James Akinjo is going to wind up being almost as important as any other point guard. And point guard inherently, we understand, it's an important position. But I'm talking about teams that might need to overly rely on their point guard in that top 10 conversation. The more we get into the season, the more that I actually think I undervalued Akinjo's value to this team after all it lost from a season ago. And I thought what Oklahoma State was able to do was pretty enlightening to that. But credit to Oklahoma State GP for winning that spot. Bryce Thompson had a game-high 19 points. Mike Boynton's team certainly wasn't expected by almost anyone outside of that locker room to get the win, but it did. And Baylor, I did not realize this. And credit, I don't know which statistician or writer. It's been repeated so much that I don't know who came up with their research at first. But I've heard this is the first time ever that a number 1 ranked team has lost back-to-back home games in the same week. Like, I understand if you're the number 1 ranked team, you're not prone to lose a lot, but you're telling me since the AP poll began in the late 40s, we've never had a number 1 ranked team drop back-to-back games the same week at home? It's kind of wild to me. Baylor just did it. It's also the first time in 76 games Baylor lost back-to-back, period. And it was the first time since 2014 that the Bears had lost consecutive games at home. They obviously weren't the number 1 ranked team in the 2013-14 season. But those are my kind of quick thoughts on the Bears. Where do you have them now? Since we've kind of been talking about your rankings, and we want to keep people updated as they listen along here. I'm going to blindly guess. Again, I haven't seen it. Going off resume, I'm going to say you've got Baylor 6. I would think that they're for sure still in your top 10.
4th.
Okay, there we go. You'll get pushback on that, but I get.
I did. A lot of comments. Baylor loses twice in a week, and you only drop them from 1 to 4. Yes, because to focus strictly on that is to ignore the first 9 weeks of the season. They still have a top 4 resume in the sport. Baylor's still 5-1 in the first quadrant, 7-2 in the first 2 quadrants. You're not going to find 4 better resumes than that. So. Am I aware that they just lost twice? Yes. But like I explained in Sunday morning's Top 25 and 1, I don't ever get too caught up in how high somebody moves up after a win or how far somebody drops after a loss. What I do every morning is wake up and get a cup of coffee and try to take a fresh look at everything that's in front of me and say, okay, based on a number of variables, but the most important one being, what is your body of work? Where does this team deserve to be right now? And you're just not going to find 4 better resumes than Baylor right now. I don't want to speak for Jerry Palm. I would assume when he updates his bracket, he's still going to have Baylor as a number 1 seed. And people will then tweet at him, but Baylor just lost twice. And he'll say, yes, but they still have a top 4 resume in the country. They just dug a big hole on Saturday. They were down 18. They nearly got out of it. Like, tell me if you agree with this. You were watching the game down the stretch. So was I. If this were a 43-minute game, does Baylor win it?
Probably so. Probably.
So.
Noah Kinjo can't say for sure, but it was they were whittling, and then like Matthew Meyer actually didn't have a good game whatsoever. He
made that big shot
out of sorts, and I can't remember who was on the call. I can't remember. I want to give him credit, but they had mentioned in the first half, because I was thinking the same exact thing about 20 seconds before he mentioned. He's like, Baylor's lost all their confidence. I think it was Fraschilla was on it. And I completely agree. Like, there was something. It was like Monstars lost their juju kind of deal. And I think Drew will get his team back into it. But yeah, if it was 43 minutes, they probably win, but there's still no guarantee of that with no Akinjo out there. But they were getting there and getting there and getting there.
Yeah.
But 40-minute game. Credit to Oklahoma State for getting a big win in the season, obviously, where the Pokes cannot get to the NCAA tournament because they are on a ban for 2022.
Yeah. Like who knows if they would have gotten there, but they were. It felt like they just ran out of time a little bit, like because they were down 9, and now it's 6, and now it's 3, now it's 2. You know, it just and then they just never got there. But like you said, credit to Oklahoma State. That's a massive win. You mentioned Akinjo, so he and Adam Flagler ended up combining to shoot 1 of 18 from the field, 2 of 10 from 3. Like, so good luck when those guys are doing that. And then I don't know if you've looked ahead, but next up for Baylor at West Virginia on Tuesday. Now, KenPom projects it Baylor 73, West Virginia 66, but I'm assuming that's going to be a fight. And Baylor is, I think, at risk, even though West Virginia just got waxed, and we'll get to that later. But Baylor's at risk of, going from 15-0 to 15-3. I mean, you gotta win. You were 15-0 and ranked number 1 in the country. Now you got to win in Morgantown to avoid a 3-game losing streak. That's tough.
And it will be tough.